in Jamaica, it's the start of another day. Just another day of cutting that old sugar cane. We're just normal people, you understand? Like working folks all over. Maybe we don't talk the way you people do, but to us it's still the King's English. And well, we kind of like it that way. We don't tell the time by no hands ticking around a clock face. We just watches the sun. And when he comes up over the treetops, then we just gets going to the cane field. This estate where I work is called Monymusk. It's just one of the estates that the company have here, but it's the biggest in the island. And there sure is a lot of cane. Every place you look, you see that waving cane, just mile after mile of it. Some of it new cane that's still growing, and some of it that me and my gang will be cutting maybe tomorrow. Most of us people lives up in the hills, 'cause it's cooler up there. And we just come down here for the cutting and lives around the estate. Once we get to the canes field, we are told where to start cutting, and then we just get going. You know, we cane cutters are happy people when we are cutting. There's something good and fine about swinging that old cane knife just where you want it. They say that this cutting ain't easy, but that don't worry me over much. I've been cutting cane since I was knee-high to an alligator, and it sure comes just easy to me now. The company pays us cutters for the amount of cane we cut, and they won't stand for no trash being with the cane, no sir. You just have to cut off the tops and then take the trash off the sides before you get the cane proper. In the olden days, they used to make the slaves cut all the cane, and all they had were the old mule carts to take it away. It sure must have taken a long time in those days to make that sugar. If there weren't no breeze to turn the mill, there weren't no work, and that must have been mighty bad. And when you think how those old sugar boats used to get right across those oceans, boy, they sure must have wanted that sugar. The actual cutting of cane hasn't altered over much since sugar was first grown. But once the cane is gathered, there's been big changes. They've now got tractors and wagons with rubber wheels to haul the cane off to the factories. But them men ain't like us. They's just cane loaders, and they's got plenty bending down and picking up. All the cane in the wagon is weighed, and me and my gang gets good money when it's stacked real high. But now the shadows is right under the trees, and it seems like time for our rest. We've been cutting this field all morning, and that sure is a long time cutting. There goes the wagons away to the factories. They haven't got far to go. Just the other side of the river. Well, we calls it the river. And they'll be back for more cane. That factory is mighty hungry for cane, and cutters are working all over the place keeping it busy. They never stops night or day. Of course, we cutters don't work nighttime. The cane yards keep plenty cane in store for nighttime. Tractors is only used to haul the cane when the cane fields is near. In some of the rail out-of-the-way fields, they has to load onto the tractors first, and then again onto the trains, before it comes to the factory. But no matter how it comes, it's all good cane, and the factory is always waiting for it, with its big hungry machines. Now, I never was one for knowing just what that machine does with that cane. But I seen it being cut up into little bits And I've seen it being squeezed and squeezed by the biggest roller you ever saw until it just don't look like sugar cane no more. But I do know that sugar water comes out of them rollers just as fast as it knows how. And it's the sugar water that they want. They evaporate it in those big tanks. And when it is just right, you can see the sugar crystal getting bigger and bigger. Then they take off the rest of the water by spinning it around and around and around. But it's not all so simple as it looks. That man there has to judge when the sugar is ready to stop going round. And he's been learning that for a long, long time. After that, the raw sugar comes down and gets poured into sacks, all ready for taking away to England for refining. You see, we only start the job here in Jamaica. It has to be made clean and white over in England. Now that sugar that you see there was growing in the cane fields only yesterday. It's a mighty big tonnage that this factory gets through, working night and day. Oh, and before I forget, one of the good things we get from this sugar making is our rum. Yes, our rum comes from sugar cane, and is plenty good with a little bit of coconut water when you're thirsty. Once the news comes that the sugar ship is coming into the bay, then we start packing off the sugar train to the river wharf. All those sacks have to be taken out to the ship on big pontoons. And that's just about the last that I see of it. Once it's started on a long, long journey to England. And maybe, who knows, one day I might get to England myself to see what happens to my sugar when it gets there.
Now, I work in that factory over there. It's one of the biggest sugar refineries in Britain, set in the heart of the London docks. You saw the sacks of raw sugar leaving Jamaica. Now, I'm going to take up the story here at the wharf, where they're being unloaded. The unloading goes on day and night. We often handle up to 3,000 tons in 24 hours. Raw sugar from Jamaica, Trinidad, and other islands of the West Indies, raw sugar from Cuba and Mauritius, and some raw beet sugar grown at home by our British farmers. Our first job after landing the sacks of sugar is to weigh them and take samples for analysis by our own laboratories and for the customs, before emptying the sacks into storage containers, each holding 1,000 tons or more. At this stage, the raw sugar consists of impure crystals covered with molasses, a dark brown, treacly substance. The first process in the refinery is to remove the layer of molasses. This is done by mixing the raw sugar with hot syrup to soften the molasses, so that when the mixture is fed into these machines, the sugar crystals can be separated. We first pour the mixture, and then, as soon as the machine starts to spin, centrifugal force throws the mixture against the rotating basket, which is a fine sieve. The syrup and molasses pass through the sieve, leaving the sugar crystals behind. Without the dark molasses, the raw sugar now appears a lighter color. We now melt the sugar crystals in hot water and pump the liquid through a strainer. Spiked arms sweep over the strainer, collecting solid impurities, such as fluff from the sacks and bits of cane. Meanwhile, the sugar solution has been pumped into these tanks for the second stage in purification. Here we mix it with milk of lime and then bubble carbon dioxide gas through. This makes chalk, the idea being that the chalk collects the impurities in the sugar. We then filter out the chalk and also the impurities in these pressure filters, leaving the sugar in the form of a clear brown liquor. The next process is to remove the brown color. This we do in this cistern, which is filled with granules of black bone charcoal. The brown liquor is fed in at the top and seeps down through the charcoal. Any impurities which escape the previous filtering processes and the color are taken out on the way. The sugar solution comes out at the bottom absolutely clean and crystal clear. Now the chap you see here, called the pansman, has one of the most skillful jobs in the factory. For inside these big tanks, or vacuum pans as we call them, the sugar solution is turned into sugar crystals. Now you may have learned in the school chemistry laboratory that you can grow sugar crystals by boiling a solution of sugar over a Bunsen burner. But while that's all right in the school lab, it's no good when you have to turn out over 2,000 tons of sugar crystals every day. So in the refinery, the sugar liquor is boiled in a pan in which the pressure is reduced so that the liquor will boil at a lower temperature, thereby preventing discoloration and destruction of the sugar crystals. Steam is passed through a coil of pipes or a calandria in the bottom of the pan and so brings the liquor to the boil. A vacuum of about 27 inches is maintained. This continues until sufficient water is boiled away for the liquor to become supersaturated. At this point, sugar dust is added by the pansman in order to start the growth of crystals. The crystals grow and fine liquor is steadily fed into the pan until it's filled with crystals of the required size. A pan makes 40 tons of sugar at a time and takes about 2 hours to do it. At regular intervals, the pansman takes a sample and puts it onto a piece of glass so that he can see when the crystals have arrived at just the right size. When he's quite satisfied, the contents of the pan are poured into these centrifugal machines and any remaining syrup is spun off. We drop the damp sugar onto this shaker, which conveys it to a granulator, the last process. Inside the granulator, the damp sugar falls in a cascade through warm air. This finally dries it, so that by the time the sugar reaches the bottom, each grain is separate, and your refined, pure, granulated sugar is ready to be weighed and packed. But perhaps you prefer lump or cube sugar. We make that by pouring the hot liquid containing sugar crystals into a mold. And then we send the mold through a cooling tunnel so that the sugar sets hard into slabs. The mold is lifted into a centrifugal machine which spins off any remaining syrup. After further drying, the slabs are now ready for cutting into cubes, and they begin their journey through a series of modern machines that do just about everything except drop the lump into your cup of tea. Every day, many thousands of tons of sugar leave Britain's great refineries. Not only the familiar packets of granulated, caster and cube sugar, but sugar in bulk form for use in the manufacture of jams, preserves, fruit canning, the confectionery trade, and the catering and soft drinks industries. Sugar not only for Britain, but for export to all parts of the world. From the growing of cane in the West Indies to the final delivery of refined sugar throughout the world, Britain's sugar manufacturers present a picture of initiative and enterprise, involving constant expansion in the cane-growing areas of the empire, thus ensuring that this basic commodity remains our purest and cheapest staple food.